Hello guys, today we are going to see the room Introduction to Flask from TryHackMe. Here we are going to understand what is Flask and how can we exploit it. So there are total 7 tasks and task 1 is Introduction. So Flask is a micro web framework written in Python. It is classified as a micro framework because it does not require particular tools or libraries. It has no database abstraction layer, form validation, or any other components where pre-existing third-party libraries provide common functions. However, Flask supports extensions that can add application features as if they were implemented in Flask itself. Extensions exist for object relational mappers, form validation, upload handling, various open authentication technologies, and several common framework related tools. To be short, Flask does not require much work from you and can be coded and deployed in a matter of couple minutes. You will find Flask especially easy if you find Django too complicated. You can go into github.com/swafox Flask examples to see some of the examples of Flask written in Flask. Let's go into task number 2, installation and deployment basics. Let's proceed with basic installation. For this room we are going to use Python 3. We can get it from both Windows and Linux here. So first you have to install Python from python.org. Now open up a terminal or CMD and install Flask by running. So I have already installed Flask, so I am not going to install it again now. We are going to use pip3 install Flask to install it. After a couple of seconds you will get everything you need for using Flask. Make a separate directory for your demo project and start virtual environment there. Virtual environments are independent groups of Python libraries, one for each project. Packages installed for one project will not affect other projects or the operating system's package. Python 3 comes bundled with the venv module to create virtual environments. So for a TLDR, a virtual environment isolates your project from the system to prevent any conflicts. Run pip3 install virtual env. If you get an error, running venv later on. So in Linux we run mkdir to create a new directory, cd to go into the directory, and python 3 -m venv space venv to create a virtual environment named venv. On Windows we are going to use mkdir and cd as usual, but to start a virtual environment we are going to use py space -3 space -m space venv space venv to create a virtual environment with the name venv. Now you need to create and set a Flask file, also known as a script that is going to contain the Flask code. Create a file with a name of your choice and run the following command depending on the system. So the file name here is hello.py, and for Windows we are going to run set flask underscore app equals to hello.py. For Linux we are going to write export flask app equals to hello.py. This is an environment where flask hyphen underscore app is an environment variable, so we are going to set it or export it based on the operating system. And that's that. All you have to do now is run flask run or flask run -- host equals to IP address to deploy a Flask app locally or publicly. So if we run now itself, we will get an error as we have not written any code in the hello.py file yet. Coming to the question, which environment variable do you need to change in order to run Flask? It is Flask app. Basic syntax and routing. Let's start with basic hello world app. From Flask import Flask app equals to Flask of underscore underscore name underscore underscore. This acts as a starting point for Flask to identify the app, the starting point of the code. We define roots as app.root of the root address, and in the root we are going to define functions. So whenever the root is accessed, the function will start executing. As you can see, we first imported the Flask library in the line 1, then defined a variable app to be a Flask project. Then we assigned a function hello world to the /root address of the web page. So the application should display hello TryHackMe on the deployed website. So we can run Flask space run to check if it displays the same. Now you might have noticed that on the line 4 we are using app.root method. In Flask, this allows us to create different pages and dynamic URLs. Simply make a few changes in the code and you can add new page to our application. So if we change the root address, then we can it is same as defining another web page. Now we will see two different messages if we browse to / or if we browse to /admin. What is the default deployment port used by Flask? So the default port is 5000. Is it possible to change that port? Yes, it is definitely possible to change it. Coming to task 4, HTTP methods and template rendering. As you might already know, web applications use different HTTP methods such as get, put, post, delete, etc. When accessing URLs, those usually are get and post. By default, a root only answers to get request, but you can easily use the method arguments in the root to handle different HTTP methods. So here at the /login root, we see that methods accepted in this root are get and also post, and we can write functions based on it. So here request.method equal to post return do the login. So whenever the /login is accessed using post method, then do the login function is returned, else show the login form will be returned. Now the Flask team has made our lives easier by creating a template rendering function inside Flask. It makes Flask automatically render HTML files into a website, making it easier to handle. Looking at the screenshot above, we can see that the render underscore template will let us define a template.html file, and it automatically renders the HTML and also passes the variables. Now let's answer the questions. Does Flask support post requests? Yes. What markdown language can you use to make templates for Flask? It is HTML. Coming to task 5, file upload. Flask also makes it easy for us to handle uploaded files. You can access those files by looking at the files attribute on the request object. Each uploaded file is stored in the dictionary. It behaves such as a standard Python file object, but it also has a save method that allows you to store that file on the file system of the server. It is important to understand that you will need a small HTML page with an upload form for this to work. So we are going to use HTML code to accept users input, and then we are going to store the file. This is the way you can easily create an uploading page with a root /upload using Flask. Flask is waiting for the post request to be called and then uses a special save function to put those files somewhere on the system. You can change the location in any way you want. Make sure to not forget to set the enc type to multipart /form-data attribute on your HTML form, otherwise the browser will not transfer your files at all. So it is mandatory to make sure the enc type is multipart/form data. Let's complete this. Now Flask injection. At this point it looks like Flask is a great framework for young developers. It definitely is a great tool, but a simple misconfiguration may lead to severe security consequences. A major vulnerability was found in Flask's template rendering. The template engine provided with the Flask framework may allow developers to introduce server-side template injection (SSTI) vulnerabilities. An attacker can execute code within the context of the server. In some cases, it may lead to full remote code execution (RCE). For the sake of this room, let's take a look at bad code configuration and see how it can be used to exploit a local file inclusion. Local file inclusion is a security vulnerability that occurs when a web application allows user to include files from the local file system. Okay. So this is a misconfigured code, that is a bad code configuration of Flask. The main reason for this vulnerability is that Jinja 2, a template rendering engine, uses curly braces to surround variables used in the template. As you can see on the line with #problem, our template is put in triple braces, which allow us to abuse the Jinja template mechanism. A variable allowing after hello is parsing a name from a variable person, but because this is a vulnerable code, we can make it output the password. Now let's start the machine. So if I am going to connect to the machine using OpenVPN, and if we go to the machine IP port 5000/vuln (name equal to) and simply put person.password at the end of the link to see the password displayed in the clear text. So if everything works out, we will get this result. That means the username and password of any user. Now let's take that vulnerability to another level and read files. So we can abuse this Jinja template rendering to enter anything inside the curly braces so that we can get the information on the screen. Now using get user file with a /etc/passwd will let us read the password file or any other if you simply change the name. This vulnerability can be easily mitigated by using a single quotation mark in the template variable instead of triple quotation. So here we are using triple quotation in the template. Using single quotation will let us mitigate this issue. It may look ridiculous, but many Python developers make these kinds of mistakes and unintentionally make their websites vulnerable to SSTI. So yeah, let me connect to the THM network using OpenVPN. Now let's go to the link. It says name. Now if we type person.password, we are going to get his password. We are going to get the hacker THM's password here. Yeah, Control V. You see his password is 12349 exclamation mark. We can also see the same here in the code. Now let's answer the questions. What's inside the home flask flag.txt? We can enter the same here in the URL by changing this path. Control V and adding quotation. Oh, okay. We should not add quotations here. Okay, there has to be spaces also. Wait. So what's inside? Okay, we have to use get user file. Yeah, that is the function that lets us read the file content. We are going to type this, and here we are going to change the path. Yes. Oh, we are going to remove the quotations here. Wow. Get user file /etc/password. Let me do this again. Control C. Control V. And then copy my path. Home flask txt. Control C. And put it inside here. Control V. Yeah. So the flask is the flag is thm flask injected. References and sources. So we can use tutorials exploit documentation. Also there are some other walkthroughs and blogs for this room. Thank you guys for watching introduction to Flask walkthrough. You can also see my other videos in the channel. Thank you.